Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about source control. I hope you all like GitHub. I know I do. Anyways, I was actually just setting up the class repository, so I want to give a huge shout out and appreciation to Alberto, who basically set all of this stuff up. I will note that I may make changes to the repository, but it has been forked from his repo. So if you have any questions about changes, that should all be available in the changelog and things like that. But for the most part, I will be going through his code and making changes where appropriate. In fact, the coding example, the OpenGL original coding example, was largely based on his previous example as well. And a lot of that stuff is in the repository that has just been set up. So let's kind of dive into it. These slides will obviously be online, and so here's a nice little YouTube that you can watch. It's a bit older, but you know, it's a good, if you've never used Git or GitHub or any of that stuff, this is a good thing for you to kind of check out. But I'll run through it right now because I just forked the repository. I haven't done anything to it locally, and so I figured I'd just record myself doing this so you guys can kind of see it as it happens. Great. So assuming you watch that, the class repository is located here. So let's see if this works. Oop. Opened it up somewhere else. That's fine. So you can kind of see all the code available here. I'm gonna get rid of this description for now. Great. So this slide deck is going to kind of talk to you a little bit about GitHub and how to get to this point. So let me actually kind of start with a completely new an incognito tab, which will hopefully give you a little bit better context into how to get through the stuff. So first you go to github.com. Cool. You may not have an account. If you don't have an account, then sign up for an account. And if you do, then you can simply choose the sign in, which will then sign you into your respective account. So let me do that. Great. If you do that, now you've logged in. Now you might not have anything here, so just ignore this. And so once you log in, or even before you log in, just click on this link and it'll take you straight to the repository that you need to go to. And then once you're in here, you have a choice. You can either fork it, and then you can operate on that code. You can pull down changes that I make as I go through the class, or not. You can always clone it directly, but assume that you hit fork. If you do, then it'll create a new repository for you, which is actually what I did. If you notice here, I actually forked Alberto's repository, so when you fork my repo, it will then link to my repo through you, and you can add more forks as necessary. So after you do that, you will be given your own version of this code. So it'll do this little thing, it'll give you the little spinny guy, and eventually you'll have your own. And so the next step is to clone your repository. And how do you do that? Well, you can actually do it manually, but it's a lot easier if you just click on this button here, clone or download. And let's use HTTPS. It's going to be a lot easier for most of you to do it this way. If you want to use SSH and you want to set up your GitHub key and all that stuff, feel free. If you know how to do that, great. But it's a little bit more advanced, and so let's just kind of go with this. It's going to have the URL that you need to take here. You can just copy it to your clipboard by clicking that link. Now there's a couple of options at this point. You can either you can download it as a zip as well. You can open it with your desktop client if you download the GitHub client. But this lecture, the Alberto's slides go through using source tree. My recommendation actually is don't use source tree anymore because it's a little bit older. You can use the, oops, where are we? The GitHub client. And when you do the GitHub client, then you should be able to download it directly to your desktop. Very, very easily. In fact, you can just click on Open in Desktop, and it'll open it up in your desktop client in GitHub, which I don't know if I have. I do have it, but great. But let me kind of go through the source tree example, and then I'll talk about how I like to do it using terminal, which is probably the best way to do it in my opinion. So if you were to download source tree, you would hit clone new, and you'd simply add in the URL that you got as you had it before and the location that you want to clone it to. And then this will clone it to your desktop. And at that point, you'll be able to see the history. The GitHub desktop client has largely the same set of features, although instead of having to cut and paste the URL, you'll be able to directly access it because it'll know who you are, it'll know your username, and it will know all of your repositories. You just have to kind of download it. And then once you have it, you can then show it in the Explorer. It'll show you where you downloaded it to, and it'll find it for you. And so this is the point where my approach kind of is the same. So let me go, and the way I like to do it, and so as a reminder, right, I've copied this to the clipboard, and then I'll go to my terminal, and I have usually a folder called my development folder, and you can either do just a paste, but that won't really give you much because that's just the URL. So what you need to do is, and you also make sure you have Git installed, and if you don't know how to install Git, you just would do this, sudo apt-get install. Of course, I'm going to forget my password. All right, so it's already up to date. So to do it from the command line, you go git clone, and then you paste in your URL, and it'll automatically create a folder for you that's the name of the Git repository. But a slightly better way to do that is to make dir IGM 309 fall 2019, right? And then I can do a git clone, and then I can actually tell it which path to clone to. When I hit enter, it will automatically start cloning this and downloading all of those files. So if you have questions about how to set up Windows subsystem for Linux, which is what I'm in, you can actually see I'm in Ubuntu here. You can also do this, by the way, in PowerShell. You can install Git to Windows and do it with PowerShell. There's like a million ways to do this, so do the one that you're most comfortable with. And now I'm here, and you can see all the stuff there. And if I want to open it, I can do open. Oops. Navigate. No. All right, whatever. But easy enough to just open it here. So you'll notice that my code is now here in kind of the same way. And here's the solution that we were looking for. So we're going to open this up. This is going to be 2019. Now, this code, I believe, last was updated for 2017. And so if you do this, you'll get this little window here. My recommendation is to update it and hit OK on everything. And it'll automatically update all of those projects. Cool. So you'll notice that first project that we were doing is going to be right here in OpenGL. So I already got feedback that my last lecture, the things were too small still, so I'm going to make them a little bit bigger again. If this is still too small, please let me know. But now I can simply build this and then run it. Let's just hit F5. Cool. So just like before, we've got, now we're using OpenGL 4.6, and we're in the main loop. And if I hit escape, nothing happens because we're not handling anything. All right, we have to be here. Anyways, whatever. Fun times. So yeah, so now we're mostly in there. And this will kind of show you a little bit more about how to build things. All right, so let's do the sandbox example as well. So we showed you OpenGL here. The sandbox example is, here we go, it's down here. So we set that as the startup project. We right click and build. So this is going to take a minute to build. And lots of warnings. So far, no errors, just lots of warnings. And let's see, let's go to main here, and let's run it. And cool. Looks like it's working. Slightly different sandbox, more Minecraft. And you have this IGME thing, which is a pretty popular framework for GUI. And yeah, we have some spacebar for sound. Apparently not. Pretty low frame rate. Oh no, 60 frames per second. That's normal. Okay, great. Cool. So yeah. So you can try out all of these. Like for example, let's try out physics, which is my favorite. No, do not stop the build. Never stop the build if you can avoid it. So you can see it's building. A lot of these warnings are mostly because of updates to Visual Studio 2019 that haven't been propagated into these new projects, but they'll still run. And so let's run the physics example, and now you can see all of these. Let's jump around here. Yeah, let's get. Come on, guys, get out of my face. Woo! Yeah. All right. So this is stuff you get to do pretty soon. It's going to be fun. All right. So you get the gist. Awesome. When you make changes, you should know that you have uncommitted changes. And so the different applications, the source tree has one way. It'll show you that you have uncommitted changes in this way. When you want to commit changes, keep in mind you want to save your work to your repository, right? And so there's a lot of pieces that you can that you're going to deal with. You're going to have to deal with generated files from Visual Studio. You're going to have to deal with files that you've changed that you want to save. And so when you have uncommitted changes, you can kind of see in source tree down here, it'll show you, you have these unstaged files, meaning that these files have not been committed, they haven't been pushed to the server, nothing. But you might not want to save them all, right? Like you don't really want to care about this OpenDB thing. You don't need to save that to the server. That's a generated file. You probably don't even want to upload your exe file either. And so you can add what's called an ignore file. So in source tree, this does it automatically for you. You can just right click on it and ignore it, which is pretty convenient. And you can also set to ignore all files with this extension, which this really kind of comes down to this thing called a git ignore file. So when you're in your repository, you'll have this git ignore file, and let's take a look at it. You can see all these different files that are being ignored. Like we don't really care about precompiled headers, we don't care about the studio specifics, we don't care about executables. But if I do status, which is the way you do this locally, notice it changed all of these projects. And I really want to pay attention, because the reason this has changed all these projects is because I've updated this to Visual Studio 2019 as we did in the beginning. And actually the VCX project is not a generated file, that is a project file. So the next time, if I don't save these changes, it will, clobber this, and I'll have to do it again. So I'll show you how to do that in the console in just a minute. But let's go through kind of the slides of how to do this in the in SourceTree, and also the GitHub desktop application has very similar flow to SourceTree. It's just a little bit more user friendly. So if you do have files that you want to save, you can do stage all or stage selected. And what that does is it adds them to staging. So you notice here it says not staged for commit. So if the way you do that in console is I'd say git add -u does anything that I've updated, which is a very convenient thing. So now you'll notice all of these are committed, they're staged, they're ready to be committed, in the same way that here you'll have the same kind of thing. And then when you're ready to commit, you can create a commit by pushing all of these things. You can create a message, and when you hit commit, it'll push it up to your local server. And so this is really, really important. GitHub is sort of or Git, I should say. Git is a distributed source versioning system. What you save locally on your machine doesn't automatically get saved on the server. And so when you make a commit, you make a commit locally, and then you push it up to the server, which we'll show you in a second. So let me do that locally, right? I can do a git commit to add a message, I do -m, and I can say, here is the first set of changes after the fork, updating to VS 2019 for all of the projects. Enter. You'll notice there's a lot of changes, but whatever, 48 files, 6,000 lines of code, but it's not going to be actually real code, as we'll be able to see in a second. And once you do that, now you've got a commit that's local to you, but it's not on the server. And you'll notice that in SourceTree, and again, same thing for the GitHub desktop, it'll tell you, oh, you have changes locally, you need to push them up to the server, and to do that you would hit this push button. And in the console, it's a little bit more complicated. You go git push origin master, and I'll explain what that means in a second. I'll do a little bit of GitHub stuff or Git stuff after this, because I'd like to make sure that you understand some of the branching, what branches are, and so on. And it'll go push this up. It'll ask me for my username and password for GitHub. I should, of course, I'm going to screw this up. Great. So now, if I go to my repository and I refresh, you'll notice that in my commit history, here is the first set of changes after the fork. And I can go ahead and click on this, and it'll even show me all the changes that I've made. They're mostly the same, but just slightly different, right? Which is a common thing. And if you were to use SourceTree or the desktop client for GitHub, you would have to indicate which branch you want to push to, in this case, master, because that's the only thing you have. And it'll ask you to authenticate, just like it did for me. And bam, now we are a master where everything is up to date. So with that, I want to show you a couple other things. This is a little bit of an extra, so feel free to turn off at this point, but it's something I really recommend. One thing that I really like to do is I don't like to operate on what's called the master branch. The master branch, imagine, is where you would do releases and final versions of things. You want to create a development branch or develop. I highly recommend checking out this thing called Git Flow. I'll post it in the Discord for you guys to take a look at. This is a really common branching strategy for development. Not that you really need that for this course, but still something that should be on your mind. So let me show you how to do it with the, you can actually create branches in GitHub. So I can go to my repository, I can go here, and I can create a new branch by doing develop, and it'll give me an option to do that, but that's for noobs. What you want to do is you want to do git checkout -b develop. So what does that do? Checkout -b will do a couple of things. It'll create a branch called develop. That's what the -b stands for, and then it'll check out, meaning it'll move me to that branch. But you can do this in two different stages. You can go git branch develop, and then now when I do git branch, it'll show me there's two branches, develop and master, and then I can go git checkout develop. And now when I do git status, I'm on branch develop and there's nothing to commit. Great. You might not be able to see this, and I don't know how I can really zoom in to my console. So let me maybe change the font size a little bit. 28, that's pretty huge, but hopefully at least now you can kind of read what's going on. I'll move it over to here. So just again, let me check out my master and delete this. So if I do git branch -d develop, that deletes the branch. So now if I list my branches, git branch master, I can do git branch develop, and that'll create a new branch called develop, and then I can go git checkout develop. And then if I do git status, it'll tell me on branch develop, nothing to commit, because nothing has changed. With that said, what I can do, let me go back to master and delete that develop branch. I can also do git checkout -b develop. And now I'm already on the develop branch, which just saved me a little bit of time. Now, you're not going to be creating the develop branch every time. This is something that you don't really want to do that often. What you want to do now is you want to push this branch to the server. So, okay, if I reload, you see there's no two branches, only master. So I want to do git push origin develop. And it'll do some stuff. I've already put in my username and password, so it doesn't ask for it to me for it again. Now you'll notice when I refresh here, now I have a develop branch. Cool. Say I wanted to do something like I wanted to change something about main. Let's say I don't want it to be red, I want it to be green. Green is red and blue, right? So I'm change this to here, and now let's set this as the starting project, and let's build it and run. Oh, I guess red and blue is yellow. Red and green is, yeah, obviously I know what I'm doing. Cool, green. So when I go back here and I check, what's the status? And the status is showing me that I've got a change to main.cpp. So if I want to actually see what the changes are, I can actually do git diff, and it'll show me, oh, I've changed one line. And that line is the fragment shader, and the fragment shader I've changed from red to green. And so now again, like I did before, git add -u, that's going to add all the files that have changed. And then I'm going to basically have to create a commit, change to green. But actually, I don't want to do it on develop. I want to do it on a different thing, because if I push it to develop, then everybody's going to see it, right? So what I can do is I can actually do a git checkout -b feature color change, right? And now that change has moved over with me to this new branch, which I can then push, what I can then commit to new color change branch. And I can get push origin feature color change. When I go over here and I look at this, you can see this has just been pushed. The commits on develop have not been affected. Only this particular branch has been affected. And what's nice about that is I can actually then go into the commits. It can show me, oh, I changed the color to green. And say I'm pretty happy with this. I'm like, yeah, I really like this. But I want my other people to maybe take a look at it and give me feedback on this. And so, as you can see here, it'll say compare and pull request. So I can do this, create a pull request, and I can say changing the color to green. I'll create a pull request. And when people, I can send other people to this, and I can say I don't want to do it against master. I want to do it against develop, which is not. Oh, let me close this. I don't want to go to this. I want to go to my my one. I'm not trying to create a pull request for Alberto's fork. So be careful of that. You can create a pull request against somebody else's code, and then you can tell them, hey, I think you should change this, which is pretty powerful in its own right. So new pull request to make sure that you're doing that, make sure you're up here in the base repository, you're pointing at your own repository, and you're also in develop, and then changing the color, create pull request, and cool. And so now I've made this pull request. I can merge the pull request, but usually I like to do squash and merge, which will give me a chance to kind of change the message there. And great, and now it's done. And I can delete the branch. And that's the whole idea. And I really recommend you guys kind of play around with this this style, because now if I go to develop, I can see that I've changed this and it can be linked to this particular PR and the whole thing. And when I go back to develop here, I can do get pull all. I can log and I can see that here is my now I can do, you can see this new color change branch with this first PR. So, okay, a little bit deeper functionality than for GitHub than you might have probably wanted to know about, but really powerful. Git is very, very useful in being able to work on large projects, both with yourself and many other people. And so I really do recommend getting really acquainted with the different feature sets and capabilities that Git has to offer. In particular, if you're planning on working on a large project, as you might be in this class. So yeah, with that's kind of the source control deep dive. Hopefully it's taught you a couple of things you might have not known about source control. I do recommend highly to do the Windows subsystem for Linux. If you're already on a Linux machine, great, or on a Mac machine, you don't have to do that, you just know what to do already. But if you have, installing Windows subsystem for Linux is super easy to do. But if you really don't want to put up with it, you can use SourceTree or you can use the GitHub desktop application. Cool. All right. See you guys in a minute. Bye.